I'm James Rosone.
And I'm Miranda Watson. We're the husband and wife writing team that created the military thriller Monroe Doctrine series and the military sci-fi series The Rise of the Republic.
We have some additional content we'd like to share with you guys today, and we hope you'll find it informative and entertaining. We're planning to create more videos similar to this in the future.
As always, please like, share, and subscribe. Now let's get started.
Good evening. My name is James Rosone, and I want to welcome you guys to this conversation we're going to have here with Gator. He's one of the Americans who's volunteered to go to Ukraine and is currently part of Chosen Company, and he's agreed to share some information with us and just answer some people's questions. So for those of you tuning into this, this is my thriller reader group, people who are joining to listen in and just be able to have a chance to ask Gator some questions about what's going on in Ukraine and hear firsthand accounts. On the side here, I've got listed his donation information. If you want to donate money towards him and his effort and what he's doing, that's listed there as well as I'll be making a donation for his time before the end of the evening as well. So without further ado, we'll talk with Gator here. So I guess the first question we had was, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what did you do before you joined Chosen?
I'm from South Florida, from Broward County, that area, Fort Lauderdale. I'm somewhat of a kind of a rare, I guess, rare case in Chosen Company. The majority of people in Chosen, especially now, are people with prior military service, combat experience. Many of them from higher level units in their respective national militaries, some of them with experience fighting in other additional militaries and maybe defense contractors or paramilitaries. There's one of my closest friends has fought, I think, in 5 conflicts. So there's a lot of people with a lot of experience in Chosen Company.
Yeah, because you actually didn't serve in the military before you went to Ukraine. So you were
No,
a
I was
regular Joe and went over there and was trained up to start doing.
right. I was in the civilian division um, before going to Ukraine. I was a writer, actually, is what I did.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah, I did some cybersecurity type stuff um, for a little while, but had by the time I left, I had mainly transitioned to more writing most of the time.
That's pretty cool. You got a pretty unique background, what you're doing there, but we could say that for a different time. The next question I had for you is, what compelled you, a guy with no prior military experience, to want to jump on a plane, travel halfway around the world to fight as a volunteer with a foreign military?
I get that question from a lot of people. It was sort of a combination of a few things. One, I knew some people who were there already, people who I had worked with in the past. Some of the security work I was doing in that capacity, there were some people I knew through that who had gone to Ukraine and were there already.
There's a few Floridians over there, isn't there?
Yeah, quite. Yeah, I know quite a few Floridians there. There's a lot of people from the Midwest and the Northeast there.
Mm.
And a lot of Canadians and a lot of Australians and Brits.
Mm.
But there's people from all over the place that I've served with personally. There's a lot of different countries in Europe and
What caught your
Canada.
interest, though, that made you want to leave
Right,
what you were doing and actually go to a really big hot zone and fight against another conventional army that, has a lot
right,
of capabilities. This isn't like we're going up against, you know, different Islamic extremist groups or something.
right.
The
Yeah.
standing army.
So it was a combination of knowing people there, some history that I have personally. Like when I was younger, my best friend was Ukrainian from Donetsk. Other died when they were pretty young, and his sort of left his family kind of alone. And I always they ended up, I believe, going back there to Donetsk, and I never really knew what happened to them. So I always, when I saw the conflict unfolding, also just I was kind of at a point in my life where I just felt stagnant, I guess would be a word for it. I felt like
Yeah.
just this sort of an existential boredom, kind of.
Kind of like
I don't,
searching for meaning and what to do, so to speak.
yeah, like
A lot of
it's,
guys do.
I felt like there was something, I could be doing something more important than I was doing. I felt unsatisfied with kind of where I had ended up. Watching it unfold, it seemed to me to be the clearest example of like a good versus evil fight that I had seen since World War II. A lot of the conflicts in between then and now, it's not quite as easy to, you know,
Yeah.
it's
Very
not quite as
blurred.
black and white. Yeah, I always looked up to, World War II veterans and that generation, and I had some family who my dad's dad was a ball gunner on a bomber in the Royal Australian Air Force in World War
Mhm.
II, and then my stepmom's dad was he drove a landing craft at Omaha Beach, and I just always looked up to those people, and
Yeah.
I always felt like if something like that happened in my lifetime, I would like to have thought that I would be the kind of person who would volunteer for it.
Yeah.
Everything kind of
Right.
came together. Yeah, like
Yeah.
I would never have forgiven myself if I didn't do it.
So when did you first arrive in Ukraine?
It was the beginning of 2023,
2023.
early 2023, maybe February or so.
Okay. So it was actually going on for almost a year at this point,
Hmm.
before you jumped over.
Yep, almost exactly a year. Yeah.
Now, when you arrived in Ukraine, like how did you manage to link up with Chosen Company and the group you're with now? And why did you choose this particular group over some of the other options I suppose were out there?
I got really lucky, honestly. So before I left for Ukraine, the only people that I knew were in a different unit. The original plan was to join up with them and work with them.
Okay.
So when I first arrived in Ukraine, the first place I went was the headquarters for that unit. They're not part of the Legion, or they're part of, I believe they're technically under the National Guard. They're part of the military. They're not Legion, though, not International Legion. And when I got there, they basically told me that the people that I would be working with were on deployment. They were gone and weren't going to be back for, I think it was 4 to 6 weeks or something like that. So they said I could either wait for them or I could try and get plugged in with the International Legion and see if I could make something happen faster if I didn't want to wait.
Gotcha.
Uh,
So how many different units are there that you could join?
there's a lot, actually. It depends on the situation. Like, some of it depends on who you know. If you already personally know people out there in particular units, and you can reach out to them personally and have them go to their command and vouch for you and stuff like that. Sometimes you can get a direct path into specific units. But if you're somebody who doesn't know anybody over there and just wants to go, you're going to end up in a much more limited number of units. So you'll likely end up in the International Legion, or at that time that I went, everybody who was volunteering and going at the beginning of 2023 was either ending up in an International Legion battalion or Carpathian Siege,
Right.
which both of them have a lot of foreigners in them.
Is Chosen Company part of the Legion, or how does that structure work with you guys?
It's not, no. When I first joined, Chosen Company had existed in other sort of versions of itself historically at different points in time with different people, I believe. At the time that I joined the Legion, there was no Chosen. The people were just part of a company of the Second Battalion. So we were all together as that company of Second Battalion, and that's where I trained a couple of months or something. And the Chosen happened because eventually a group of people from that company in the International Legion broke away from the Legion and essentially contacted a storm brigade, a motorized storm brigade that was part of the regular military, the 59th Motorized Brigade. The guy who's now our company commander knew people there, reached out to them, and asked if we could go there and form our own assault company under their brigade. So a number of us left the Legion, went over to the 59th, signed contracts with them, and formed Chosen Company as an assault company as part of the 59th Motorized Brigade, which is a Ukrainian brigade.
That's cool. It's interesting to hear about, because I don't think a lot of us have honestly any idea how these organizations and groups are broken down, or how people actually end up in any of these things. It's kind of a little opaque. I think it's like you're saying, you gotta, if you know someone that's already over there, then
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot of like recruiting amongst internal friends and networks like that. But
Right.
yeah, I don't think they really talk a whole lot about how they do some of that.
I got very lucky, basically. I ended up in the right place at the right time. Ended up in the Legion when all of these people happened to be together in that part of it. When they made a decision that they wanted to leave and go somewhere where they would have a better opportunity to do more fighting, be on the front, live on the front, and be doing a lot more aggressive, higher tempo work.
Mm.
Uh, I was lucky, basically just lucky enough for them to allow me to go with them. And not everybody did go. Not everybody was brought along to 59th from that company. But I managed to secure a position there. Ryan and the rest of them and the NCOs allowed me to go, despite the fact that I had no prior service. I had passed my probationary period in the Legion and everything like that. Proved I could shoot, proved I knew my way around the weapon platform that I needed to, and that I wanted to be there and was dedicated to being there. So I was just in the right place at the right time, ended up with a really good group of people, and yeah, then we ended up forming Chosen, and things sort of sped up rapidly from that point on.
Is physical activity, like you guys do a lot of PT together? Is that like something that people don't they underestimate? I know when we were in Iraq, one of the one of the challenging things was all of the gear and equipment you carry. I mean, you're talking, gosh, I think when I had my your IBA on, your body armor with your plates, your magazines, your ammo, your camelback, it's like 77 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
That's without any kind of patrol pack or anything else. So trying to move like quickly with all that gear on, that was really requiring some cardiovascular for sure. But I gotta
It's not,
imagine
yeah,
that you guys got to be running and gunning like a lot.
it's not easy. It's not. There's a lot of. It certainly can. The weight can add up. I'm also the smallest person in the unit, so that doesn't make it easier. When we were in Second Battalion in the Legion, we would train every day. Sometimes it would be PT, sometimes it would be tactical stuff, sometimes it'd be both. Uh, Medical stuff, they would just kind of switch around between things. But when we moved to 59th and formed Chosen there, we had a lot more autonomy over sort of what we were doing. The training that we did was a lot more effective. We were able to really start uh, taking guidance from Ukrainians who lived year round on the front, a lot of experience with the type of operations that we were going to be doing,
Mhm.
and sort of immediately jump right into training a whole lot of trench assault tactics, a whole lot of CQB. So we're a motorized brigade. So
Yeah.
a typical operation for us, not every operation, but um, a lot of the operations we would do would start in the Humvees, and we would sort of do these thunder runs where we would just catch Russian positions off guard and just haul ass in the Humvees towards them, hammer them with the Brownings to suppress them, have everybody jump on out of the Humvees while the Brownings are suppressing them, and basically rush the positions and just use violence of action to overwhelm the positions.
Yeah, I remember seeing a few videos like that on YouTube of and Telegram of you guys doing some of those kinds of actions. It's really impressive.
Yeah, that's the definitely the chosen company trademark way of going about it. It's a much more aggressive sort of approach than a lot of other units, particularly foreigner units would take, and especially at that point in time, it was sort of unheard of for
Yeah, I
uh,
think if you like, that's probably was it one of like the Americans or Australians that kind of came up with those ideas to start hitting those tactics and doing that?
it was a little bit of everybody.
Yeah.
A lot of it was our company commander was Ryan.
Yeah.
Uh, Ryan O'Leary,
Yep.
if you know him. He has a very like aggressive approach tactically to these things,
Yeah.
and it works. It works well.
Does.
He knows what he's doing. A lot of it was sort of his pitch to the 59th Motorized Brigade before we went over there was, listen, we're going to be, aggressive. We're perfectly fine with a very high operational tempo, sometimes multiple operations a week.
Yeah.
Um, we're going to basically show you that a team of foreigners can be worth having around
Yeah.
and make a big difference on the field in a relatively short period of time.
Yeah. Well, you're able to
So,
cobble together a real lot of experience from different units, different uh things, training that they've all gone through and the different conflicts. You're able to apply that to
right,
lessons learned to this conflict.
right, and that's the other benefit is having so many people who have so much experience from other conflicts and other theaters. Um, there's never an operation in Chosen Company where every single person in the company doesn't have a say in how it's planned out and executed. If we have any intelligence, we'll all know about it. If we have any imagery, like drone imagery, we'll sit
Yeah.
there and pour over footage of the target area. Uh,
Understand where you're going.
yeah,
And I think that's got to be one of the biggest like impacts and differences that a group like yours would have in comparison to some of the other units that aren't trained to operate like that because most most unit like at least I can speak to it on the American side. We have a strong NCO core, so it's not an officer top-down approach.
right.
When you're going out on a mission or preparing to go do something, everyone's usually briefed on what's going to happen, what's the objective, shown, like you say, where we're going, maps and images and stuff like that. So all the way down to like the lowest level, everyone knows what's happening and what's
Hmm.
required and expected. So when a casualty does happen, you don't suddenly become leaderless and literally don't know what to do next. That's where chaos and confusion reigns. And, we've seen that with some of the Russian units when a leader, battalion commander or company commander gets zapped, and next thing you know, that unit is like combat ineffective, and they don't know what to do or how to react because they don't have that person at the top thinking for them, so to speak. And
Hmm.
when you got, strong NCOs, man, staff sergeants and platoon sergeants, they run everything. They can keep everything moving and keep the guys going. And you got your sergeants and fire team leaders who can keep everyone on task and keep it all moving forward like that. So that's got to be a huge asset for the Ukrainians to be able to rely on that.
Yeah, I would attribute a lot of our success as a company, um, and a lot of our efficacy to that specifically, to the fact that we have very, very strong NCOs. We have very good NCOs who know what they're doing. Just the way the company runs is very efficient. It's
Yeah.
very on operations. We work very well together. The squads know each other very well, and the NCOs are all extremely competent, experienced people.
Yeah. So here's an interesting question. Okay. Probably, I don't know if you've been asked this before in the past, but how do you guys actually get compensated? I mean, uh, are you guys part of the Ukrainian army and you're compensated through them so you guys can support yourselves while you're over there, or if you've got families back home, things like that? How does some of that actually work? Because it's not quite like being in the American army and that whole apparatus like that.
Yeah, I mean it's simpler than you would think. We are when you go there and volunteer, like for the Legion or in a unit like the 59th or something like we were fighting with, uh, you are enlisting in the armed forces of Ukraine, just
Okay.
like anybody else would.
That
So,
keeps you protected under Geneva Conventions and things like that, or at least it's supposed to.
well, the
Yeah,
Russians don't particularly care for any of that, but
yeah, exactly.
we have a military ID, just like everybody else does,
Okay,
salary card, just like everybody else does. Set up a bank account with the salary card and everything.
okay,
Um,
good.
we get paid the exact same way every other Ukrainian soldier does. We're just enlisted members of the armed forces of Ukraine. Works
Is
the
there like
same
a
way.
rank structure or hierarchy? So if you've been there for a couple of years, you get promoted and move up, or you get elevated to different positions like that. Is there, I don't know, is it kind of similar to our own armed forces, how that works?
There are similarities, yes, but there are also differences for Ukrainians and foreigners.
Okay,
So it's very different for Ukrainians and foreigners. Foreigners are not typically given much rank officially. They're not. You're not going to be getting promotion after promotion or anything like that as a foreigner. Typically, you'll have your company commander or something might have, in reality, in the Ukrainian military, some kind of NCO rank,
okay.
but in practice, he'll be your commander, and then your NCOs will, in reality, be the same rank as you, but be acting NCOs because the commander decided that, appointed them into that position. So it's difficult for foreigners to gain rank in the military, but it's not so much that they don't want foreigners having rank as much as it is that those pipelines and pathways to for those types of things to happen just weren't really there. The invasion just kind of happened so quickly, and obviously the war has been going on for a lot longer than it's been going on since 2014. But as far as the full scale invasion starting in 2022 goes, um, it happened very quickly, and a lot of foreigners came over to help, and there weren't necessarily so many structures in place to deal with them logistically as far as promotions and things like that. because we're not citizens. There's a lot of things that are much harder to do without citizenship or residency.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah,
They probably run it or treat it somewhat like the French Foreign Legion, I would suspect, or how they kind of organize things a little bit too, because they're part of the French army, but they're kind of also not. That's
right.
interesting. Cool. So another question I got before we take a short break then to let everyone ask some questions of you is when you got there in February of 2003, so or 2023, I'm sorry. So when was the first time you actually saw your first, combat action like that? And what was kind of going through your mind as you were being briefed and getting prepped to go on your very first, military operation like that?
It was the summer counteroffensive.
Okay, so you were part of that big deal. Yeah.
Mhm. So I believe my first operation was in,
Was it like Roboteam area or?
no, it was in Pervomaysk. It was the southern flank of Avdiivka. Avdiivka is a big, I don't know how familiar you are with sort of the battle map and how things have progressed over the past couple of years, but
Yeah.
Avdiivka is a fairly big it was a fairly important strategic city, fairly big, um, and yeah, a very hot part of the front too. And
Oh
it's
yeah.
Donetsk Oblast. That's always been a very, very hot part of the front.
Yeah, that's
Even
those static lines where from there you guys could exchange fire back and forth with the Russians in Donetsk City down there because you're not that
yeah,
far.
no, we weren't far at all. So from the town we were doing a lot of fighting in at that time in Pervomaysk, you could see the lights of Donetsk City at night. Um, you could just look off into the distance and see the lights of Donetsk City. So it wasn't far at all, well within artillery range of Donetsk City. Um, it was basically that town, Pervomaysk, and then if we were to take Pervomaysk, the next town to take would have been Pisky, and then after Pisky is Donetsk City.
Okay. Let's do a short screen share of a Google Earth map. And then I'll exit out of there. So you guys can kind of see where that's at. That would be Adivka's right here. And here's the next city, the old airfield. And so if I'm not mistaken, a lot of the fortified belts were along this area here where it was you had a really built up hilltop area, trench network, and obviously you got this forest belt here. You got some of the coke plants and stuff, and then
Yeah,
this
the coke
section
plant was
it's hard
the
fought area.
like the most fortified part of the city, basically.
Yeah.
It's
When you
yeah.
zoom down, you can see, just from Google Earth, guys. It's not like I bought satellite imagery for this, but you can see even some of the fortification lines from the last update of the map. If we go over to some of the some of the airport areas, you can see a lot more of it. This is all really heavily fought, contested areas. I mean, this was
Oh yeah. For
massive, massive amounts of artillery that just saturated these areas for months.
over a decade.
Yeah, I mean,
They've been fighting there, and there'd been separatists in and around Pisky and Pervomaysk in that area for 10 years, from since the original invasion in 2014.
yeah, yeah. And losing this was sadly kind of a big deal because it was a high ground and it really, strategic wise, when you look at the bigger picture, it opens up to a lot of more flat terrain area in the back here, which makes it a lot harder to contain the fighting and keep the Russians at bay. Um, and it ends up threatening other elements of the front too, because now you have a weak spot that's been kind of pried open. I mean, you can still see even from up here different, fortified lines where they've kind of started doing something. Suppose we got some satellite image, we'd see a lot more dug in areas and stuff, but you can see where there's been a lot of positions dug and a lot of fighting happening. Um, so you guys were here. Now you were on the southern side. That would have been over in this section.
We were on the southern flank of the UK, yeah. So I don't know if there's any way for you to search up a city or a town or
Yeah. If you put in what town you want me to look up?
it's called Pervomaysk. So Pervo
P-E-R-O.
Pervo Maiske.
Oh, I think right here, Pervomaysk. Right here. Okay, this section right here.
Yeah, Pervomaysk.
Okay.
And
Wow.
then right to the east of it, you should see Pisky nearby, and then Donetsk City is not too far past that.
Yeah, right there. Let me see if I can actually find some of there's a way I can put in all of it so that way we see a bit more. Okay. Yeah, so you got the main things here, and then yeah. So this must have been a heck of a fight. Yeah, just trying to like hold this area, because really you're talking just a main thoroughfare, and
Mm-hmm.
you've got the river dividing it, and a few tree line areas, and a lot of open grounds.
Yep, and if you follow that sort of that line back, not so far, you'll get to Pokrovsk, where there's a whole lot of fighting going on right now.
So across, that would be, oh, we gotta go really far back. Let's pull it up here. Yeah, so it's probably moved up into this area up here now.
Yeah,
Jeez. Okay. So this was the area you were at then. Is this the area where you got injured the first time, or
it is. Yeah,
was that okay?
I was wounded in Pervomaysk. Yeah.
Now is that the only time you've been injured in the conflict?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Wow, so you've been kind of down and out for quite a while from this then.
Yeah, I had spent I was there through the summer, was wounded in later on in the summer. I got it was our second incursion into Pervomaz. There was the company did some stuff in between there in different areas sort of around there and in the fields, different hills and fields around there. Uh, between the first and second incursion into Pervomaz, I believe. Sort of hard to remember the order of things now. But you can actually watch on YouTube Operation Pervo 1, which was our first incursion into Pervomaz. It's you can watch it on YouTube, and it kind of switches. We have a few operations on YouTube where it switches between our GoPro footage and drone footage and stuff like that, and gives you an idea for how the operation unfolded. And Operation Pervo 2 is also on YouTube, but it's split into two parts because it was a much longer, more intense battle.
Yeah.
Pervo 2 is where I was wounded. Kind of mangled my leg at first from a
Yeah, I was gonna ask
shell.
what happened with all of that, and I know some of the guys will be kind of curious to know.
Yeah, so we basically infilled into the town in the middle of the night before the operation, um, just to avoid what detection we could. And um, during Pervo 1, we had pushed up pretty far into through the town, all the way up to a certain point in the village. So it's sort of a series of straight lanes running from west to east. There's a northernmost lane that runs from west to east, a one underneath it, just south of there, that runs from west to east. Then there's a big field, and then on the other side of that field, there's a big main road that runs from west to east. And at the end of that, in that area, there's a bridge that sort of goes over that road. And underneath that bridge, they had a Dishka under there, a big 50 caliber machine gun, and a trench system set up there, very heavily fortified. And in the village itself,
Is that this area here?
I've tried to pick it up on the map before, and it's a little difficult to do because there's a lot of areas that look the same.
Yeah, there's one road here. There's the other one on the other side. It's a big field, obviously. Down here is what looks like would have been at some point like a highway interchange. It looks to have been severed definitely a few times.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
And beyond that highway, beyond that bridge and everything, there was just all kinds of armor and artillery and reinforcements, and they had all kinds of stuff behind there. But basically, our goal was to push all the way through the village up to that bridge road.
Okay.
And I was in Bravo. My squad was Bravo. We were on the northernmost lane, so sort of the top. Between our first operation into Pervomaisk and our second operation into Pervomaisk, they had seriously, very strongly reinforced their defenses there, and sent a lot of different groups out there. So we were fighting against a whole lot of people.
I was gonna ask, do you know what type of units were you fighting Russian Marines or the VDV paratroopers or?
It was a combination of Storm Z, which is like sort of the some of them are like convicts and stuff like that.
Former Wagner guys a little bit.
Yeah, so that sort of thing. It was a combination of those guys up front, then behind them, different types of regulars mixed with former separatist units, which by that time had been assimilated into the Ministry of Defense, into the Russian Ministry of Defense. So they had become part of the Russian military as well. So we were fighting the 80th Separate Intelligence Battalion, I believe it is, which is the Spartan Battalion, they call themselves.
Okay.
Also Somalia Brigade or Battalion, which are both former DPR separatist units, sort of their elite forces. But also elements from a couple different motor rifle brigades and armor brigades or something like that, just regulars. And there could have been others that we don't know about also. But basically every weapon that I know to exist in the Russian arsenal, aside from aircraft, was used against us simultaneously during that operation. Everything from
What was it like,
snipers.
what was it like encountering that, dealing with actual Russian aircraft and these
No aircraft.
Miranda.
Everything but aircraft. Everything from snipers to machine guns, riflemen to multiple mortar teams zeroing you at the same time, to RPGs, AGS, very heavy AGS fire, which is like basically a Russian equivalent of Mark 19s.
Mm.
And they use them kind of like mortars. They'll basically just arc them like mortars. They'll set them up a bit further back, and they'll just put a big angle on them and just kind of spray whole areas with them, and just covers everything in shrapnel, and it's a nasty thing to deal with. Very heavy AGS fire, more drones than anybody had ever seen at one time. It was ridiculous. You can see when if anybody's interested in watching this operation on YouTube, you can look up the bloodiest battle of the Chosen Company, and it's split into part 1 and part 2. And it was insane. I mean, there would be a drone overhead. You would shoot one down, and it would be immediately replaced by 5 more. And you would shoot one of those down, 5 more would show up. So the entire time that, from basically the minute we started taking contact, we had to be looking ahead of us, to the sides of us. We're taking fire from in front of us, from both sides, looking up because there was constantly drones dropping munitions on us, looking down because there's mines everywhere. There was no direction that you didn't have to look for threats. Every single direction. Up, down, left, right, ahead, behind, sometimes just everywhere. It was very, very intense, very heavy resistance.
When we were talking before, you said you had gotten injured during a mortar attack when you guys were in the process of pulling out, right?
Right. We had assaulted and pushed up. Uh, not quite sure how far from our starting point. At a certain point into the operation, it became apparent that it wasn't going to happen. That we were not going to make it to the bridge road, and that we were just facing way too heavy of resistance and had taken too many casualties at a certain point to continue. So basically the squads, kind of one by one, came to that realization that this is not working. Like, we're going to need to pull back. Some squads were in much worse positions than others. Delta in particular was the squad where we lost 2 guys on that operation. They were both from Delta. They had progressed up much further than anybody else because they had lost their radio, so they had no comms, and they thought the other squads had also progressed up to that point, but really they had moved up much further than anybody else and kind of stranded themselves out there. All of them were very seriously wounded. By the time we were pulling back and trying to make it back to the same place we infilled to the night before, which was kind of a basement underneath a big collapsed concrete building, basically everybody in my squad had been wounded at that point. By the time we made it back there, I think there was 2 people that weren't wounded. The rest of us were. But yeah, we were just starting to kind of get things together and move back along the proven route, so we didn't hit any mines, try to get back to that area. Taking a lot of fire at the same time and constant mortars. Just there must have been a handful of mortar teams. We could see, I mean, from the position we were in, we could look up and see ISR drones flying way up higher above the rest of them, too high to shoot or anything, way up there. Just, you could just look up and see them just staring right down at you, and you know they're up there just adjusting fire for the mortar teams. So no matter what you do, as soon as you move, they're relaying it to the mortar teams that you just moved. So no matter where you go, the mortars are following you, and
Partly behind.
yeah, and there were so many of them firing that there were no real lulls in it. There were no real breaks. It was just volley after volley after volley, just continuous mortars landing. It felt like every few seconds another 120 would land. These mortar teams are good too. Very accurate IDF. Like the stuff was coming in right on top of us. And
Those are big mortars too, 120s. Those are not
oh,
small.
they're big. Yeah, yeah. You can see in the footage they're just
Yeah,
tearing everything
like
up.
pretty big freaking mortars when they hit.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it would throw dirt like they're massive. It's huge detonation. And they throw
Yeah,
shrapnel
like
everywhere.
consideration, guys, like we have 105 millimeter howitzers and we have 155 millimeter howitzers, which is the M777s and the M109 Paladins. Well, 120 millimeter mortars between the two. That's a really sizable mortar. That's the largest caliber mortar we use in the American military as well. But man, those are huge mortars. Those aren't small.
They have field guns too, artillery also. The 152s or 155s, whatever they are.
Yeah,
You
they
can
got
use
a mix
those
of
too.
both. Yeah.
Yep, those were landing also. You can see some of those in the footage too. Those are big, big explosions.
Hmm.
But yeah, 120s are no joke. And they were absolutely constant. Just would not stop and very close. There were, I lost count of the times where where I was essentially inside the blast radius of one, like, but somehow didn't,
Yeah, like
wasn't,
the concussive blast of that, like that's got to just really shake you guys up every time
yeah,
it's hit. If you're within a close proximity, even if the shrapnel doesn't get you, the
it,
concussive blast will rattle the hell out of you.
yeah, it certainly can. One of them in particular got me pretty good when I was standing right on the north side of this building we call Red Brick. Um, if you watch the footage from our first mission into Pervamayask, there's a part where I fire an RPG through the wall of it. It's this little red brick house, but that same building, I was standing on the north side of it, and just a few, maybe 15 feet back, and one of the 120s landed right in between me and the wall, and yeah, that rang my bell pretty good. Kind of tossed me on my side, and when I sat up, it felt like there was sand in my head or something. Just like
Yeah,
my whole equilibrium was off, and ears were ringing. Couldn't hear anything. I had to kind of stumble around on all fours for 30 seconds or so. I just couldn't balance or anything. Yeah,
yeah,
there's a big concussive sort of blast if you're close enough to them. Uh, but basically, some kind of shell landed. I don't know if it was an artillery shell or a 120 because it was behind me, but whatever it was kind of threw me into a shell scrape. And it was kind of a deep one. It was like maybe 2, 3 feet deep, just a hole in the ground. And I landed like knee first on a brick and just smashed my knee into this thing. So it was at the bottom of this hole, just like, just grabbing my knee and just listen to whomp, 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 just mortar after mortar hit. And I was like, okay, I just gotta like sit here for a second, hope one of those doesn't land directly in this hole and just vaporize me. Wait till some sort of lull in the mortars, and then I'm gonna
they
get
can
out of
come
this
up.
shell scrape, run into the next one. That was the plan, at least.
Yeah,
And so I waited, and there was a few seconds pause. So I was like, okay. So I got up, sort of crested the top of that shell scrape, but by that time, the next volley was already landing. So a mortar landed. There was actually, at this point, there was three of us. I had moved up to like this little white wall thing, and there was three of us behind it. And in the footage, you can see the three of us move out from behind that white wall. And right as we did that, another 120 landed, maybe 30 meters away or so, kind of behind us and to the left. And there's a little graphic, but if you watch the footage, you see it anyway. It landed right on top of a dead Russian, sent his head flying. And my buddy Irish was closer to it, sitting in a hole, and he got kind of covered in that.
Yeah.
And it just sent shrapnel all just flying everywhere in our direction. And the three of us who had just moved out from behind that white wall, it dropped all three of us. All three of us got hit with shrapnel. I got hit in the small of my back, like right on top of my kidney. The guy in front of me got hit right in his one of his nuts, and the guy in front of that got a hole punched through his calf. So that was that, yeah. So then
what happened then? Like you guys get hit. Were you guys still mobile to kind of get yourselves out of there, or did you have to wait for your buddies to come grab you and drag you out?
I mean, it was either we make it back to cover or die. I mean, we didn't really have too much of a choice at that point, you know. We were taking fire from three directions, being constantly mortared, constant drones dropping all types of munitions,
But there was a lot of
fragmentation
small arms fire
rounds.
coming at you guys from
Yeah, a lot of small arms fire. There's machine gun fire and sniper fire coming from across the field from the main road, that main road running down to the bridge, coming at us from the south. Then to the north, there was these two bodies of water and a gap between them. And then if you follow that gap of grass and go farther that way, there's this diamond-shaped compound that there were Russians in. We were taking fire from the compound as well. And then we were moving east. That was the most fortified direction. So we were taking fire from the east as well. So left, right, and ahead. Small arms fire from those directions. And then the mortars and the drones is on top of that. So we had to move. We had to
you couldn't stay there.
No, we had to get out of there. I just ended up kind of falling on top of a couple of my buddies who were the other two who had kind of gotten into the shell scrape ahead of me. And I felt myself get hit right after I heard that detonation. So I knew that I was hit. Just kind of felt like somebody whacked me with a golf club or something in the back. So I knew I was hit. Didn't know how bad it was exactly, but I knew it was right in my left side of my lower back, right where my kidney is. So I knew it was potentially not good. And I just sort of laid there for a second, and I felt blood starting to pool under me. So I thought I was dead, honestly. At that point, I thought I was screwed. Couldn't move my legs either. Tried to move my legs, and I couldn't. Like, my brain would tell them to move, and they just wouldn't move. So I just kind of looked up and was just, I was pretty positive I was dead.
I know everyone's got some questions they wanted to ask you. I know Travis,
Sure.
He posted the first one there and had a really good one. So, Travis, why don't you go ahead and ask your question then?
Hey, how you doing? As you were describing these attacks, does your formation get indirect support during your attacks? You're in the form of artillery, mortars, any ISR, or do you just kind of get thrown at it?
That's a good question. So we always, of course, try to have utilize whatever support we can in the area. So we did have ISR drones up. That can be a little bit spotty sometimes though, because most of the time comms get jammed. So like you don't your communication with the drone teams and people who can see what's going on from above is very intermittent sometimes. And we had one squad who had lost their radio, so we had one squad we couldn't contact at all. Communication with the drone team and with headquarters was very spotty and intermittent. Um, there was friendly artillery at the beginning, but it just wasn't enough to, deal with the force that we were up against. I believe also the day before we had launched this attack, they had sort of just hammered this place with artillery. So that was another thing that likely tipped them off to the fact that there was an assault coming. We did have like attack drones up in the air also. We had drones that were there to drop munitions on them and stuff. But we actually even ended up shooting one or two friendly drones down because at a certain point it just became impossible to tell. There were so many drone, like we would see a drone above us, and if we had comms at that moment, we would radio and ask, "Hey, is there a friendly drone above us?" And they would say, "Yeah, the one above you is friendly," and there would be five there. So, you know, we at a certain point we were basically just shooting at everything that moved. Um,
How do you
it
shoot these
was
drones down? Do you have a specific type of rifle and ammo you guys use?
At that point we didn't have much. We were just shooting them down with our rifles. Uh, we shot one down at the beginning. My squad, we shot one down and it fell, hit the ground, and detonated. You can see that in the footage. Uh, then also when Charlie Squad had part of their what they were meant to do was clear some buildings and then move up and uh, rendezvous with Bravo with us. And when they were about 50 meters behind us, I was with my buddy the one who was hit in the nut by that mortar. Me and him were in a shell scrape and saw another drone about to drop a big thermobaric charge on Charlie Squad, and we shot that one down with our rifles. Uh, but we didn't have any on later operations. We had much more like electronic warfare and um, jammers and things like that we to use. But at this operation, we didn't have much of that.
Okay. Now, James Crow, you had a question you wanted to ask. Why don't you ask yours? And then we'll go to James Byrne. And if you've got any, Evan or Liam, then you guys will be up next.
Hi there, yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Brilliant. Yeah, a few questions. First
Mm-hmm.
of all, I remember watching a YouTube video. It was around the time just after the war had begun. There was two American volunteers. I can't remember whereabouts it was in Ukraine, fighting. I remember there being quite a bit of a sort of language barrier communication-wise. So there was one soldier, he didn't speak any Ukrainian whatsoever, but his sort of teammate was also American, spoke Ukrainian, so he was like translating everything that was going off. He just seemed quite sort of vulnerable. Like if his crewmate got taken out, then he would be screwed communication wise, unless any of the Ukrainians spoke English. So how does that work if you're like communicating with others? Do you all just do it in Ukrainian, or you just do it off from code words and so on?
We'll have like an interpreter that will be at the top. They'll be with whoever's sort of overseeing the operation, and he'll be on the comms and kind of be our communications liaison between us on the ground and command and support, like from brigade, from the Ukrainians, uh, and the drone teams and stuff like that. At that point, most of the drones who would be supporting us were piloted by Ukrainians. So he would kind of interpret and sort of relay messages between us and them uh, when the comms weren't jammed, that is. But we also worked with Ukrainians on the ground that would be with us as well, and would basically just communicate with them however we could, essentially. Most of us know like enough words to kind of get basic points across and basic instructions across. But there's definitely a language barrier sometimes. There's so much planning that goes into the operations beforehand that includes both us and the Ukrainians that are going to be there, and the Ukrainian leadership and our leadership all together, that everybody sort of knows what's supposed to be going on. So it makes it a little easier to kind of communicate sort of non-verbally, kind of signal to each other what's supposed to be going on.
Another question as well. I mean, I know you're injured, so you might not be as sort of in tune as to what's going off on the front line now or not. But do you know what? So like the morale is like for soldiers at the moment. Of course, with Trump about to take office, there's worry that he might try and force some deal to stop the war. So what's sort of morale like? Is everyone sort of worried that there could be some peace deal soon, which would mean that Ukraine would feel that it can't claim back its territory? Is that sort of affecting morale, do you know, or is it just sort of everyone's just going to keep on going regardless?
Everyone knows that Trump has these plans to speak with Putin and try to freeze the conflict or whatever, or put an end to it. But nobody's quite sure exactly how he's going to try to do that. Most people seem to believe that Trump, at least most people I know, seem to believe that Trump is going to go to Putin with some kind of proposition, and Putin is going to reject it. And most people believe that we're going to be fighting for quite some time.
It's always tough. Like, how do you end some of these conflicts? And I spent 3.5 years in Iraq. Believe me, I was heavily invested in that mission and what we were doing. And it was really tough watching that come to an end like that, because I knew we weren't ready to be done with that mission yet, because they weren't ready to stand on their own. And sure enough, that's exactly how it played out with ISIS and what happened subsequently, and we had to go back in there again. So it's I understand their perspective completely. It's a tough situation.
It's a tough situation for everyone, and
Yeah.
particularly for Ukrainians, because
Their land, it's their country.
no Ukrainian wants to give up pieces of their own country to this foreign power that's essentially murdered thousands of their countrymen, women, children, abducted tens of thousands of children, and murdered countless people who have done nothing but try to defend their families and loved ones and land. Nobody wants to fight for the rest of their life. Nobody wants to die, and nobody wants to capitulate to them either.
Yeah.
So it's a tough situation.
Yeah, and it's hard to convey some of that to Americans and Australians and even Brits, because I mean, Britain went through the Blitz and they have that shared experience, but that was also now approaching 80 years ago. And for the United States, our civilians have never experienced being invaded and attacked in the manner that Ukraine has, and living to that. I mean, we had 9/11 and that, and the towers that they knocked down, and that really shook the nation as it should. But that was also, you know, an event that happened that time, that one day. It wasn't something that was happening on a weekly basis, like you see with the Russian missile and drone attacks, which is just really tough. Now, Scott Bartley, you had a couple of questions. I want to make sure we get to you and then Evan and Liam before we go back and ask Gator a few other questions.
All righty,
Oh.
Gator, what do you personally do to prepare to go to battle?
Good question.
Do you mean in terms of like planning or in terms of like
Oh, physical and
personal?
mental is probably what
I'd be interested in both.
We do, we spend a lot of time studying the area that we're going to be operating in every way we possibly can. So hopefully by the time we go there, we already know it like the back of our hand. We will do a lot of training. We'll try to sort of set up, if we can, training that best emulates what we're going to be doing on an upcoming operation, and we'll just do it again and again and again until it just becomes muscle memory to run through something very similar to what we're going to be doing on the operation. And just try to be as prepared as we can be. As far as me personally, I thought about it a lot more, I guess, when we first moved from the Legion to 59th, and I hadn't really been out in the field yet. I thought about that a lot, like what I should do, and like maybe like what would be the right and wrong things to do to prepare for an operation. But once I actually went out there for my first time, after that, it just became easy to kind of do the training and everything, and kind of just try to take advantage of the time I have with my friends, really, before the operation, because after the operation's over, they might not all be there. So I just kind of try to enjoy the time that I have with my friends.
Makes sense. I was also wondering, what are some things a civilian would never realize about combat?
Oh, um,
What was a big misconception you had as a civilian who'd never prepared for it and then suddenly was in it? Basically, that's a good way to ask, I suppose.
For sure.
That's a good question. I don't feel like I necessarily had too many misconceptions per se, just because I felt acutely aware of the fact that there was no way for me to know what to expect. Like, I knew, because I was surrounded by so many people with so much more experience than me, I knew that nothing would prepare me for what it actually felt like to take contact and be in combat until I was actually there. So I just sort of tried to be as attentive and observant as I could, and really just follow the lead of the people with more experience than me. As far as misconceptions other people have, I guess one of the things that I see a lot is people seem to think that it's like, when I read comments and stuff online, people seem to think that firefights and engagements are all like direct fire exchanges of direct fire and stuff like that, when in reality it's like engagements are like 80% IDF. It's like a large percentage of the time you don't see the enemy. It's sometimes you do, like in operations where you're clearing trenches and stuff. That's a very up close and personal thing. You're going to see people face to face. You're going to be fighting people up close. But when you do something like you're assaulting a village or something like that, these people have had 10 years to fortify it and dig in and conceal themselves and stuff like that. And um, yeah, you see a lot of people making comments on YouTube and stuff like, I can't even see who you're shooting at. Like, this is fake, like staged. It's totally staged. Like, I can't even see any Russians and stuff like that. And people just have no concept of how combat works at all. And uh, they just imagine it like a movie or a video game or something. I don't know what it is. I see a lot of people online commenting on combat footage that is very clearly, to me, real from from all types of different units, accusing it of being staged or fake or something like that. And I'm not sure exactly what it is they expect to see. Um, I don't know what it is exactly. I guess you'd have to ask those people. But apparently, there is a very big difference between how people imagine war looking and how it actually looks.
Yeah, war is like usually it's like 98 to 99% of flat out boredom and 2 to 3 and like 1 to 2% of absolute terror. And you know, that's how it could be a lot of times.
I will say there is a lot more actually seeing the enemy in this war than there
Yeah.
probably has been in other
Yeah.
recent ones. A
Yeah.
lot of the fighting is very up close and personal.
People have seen too much Call of Duty is what it comes down to. They see and you think that's what it's really like. And I'm telling you, it's not. There's an awful lot of boredom in those few moments of just sheer terror, happen when IEDs are going off near your vehicle or you got mortars and rockets coming into your fob and start landing
Chaos.
stuff. Terrifying. Liam and Evan, did you have any questions you wanted to ask as well? I know John wanted to ask a couple of logistics questions.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to ask a little bit about some of that downtime, really. I know they were a fairly high tempo unit. They're doing, 1 or 2 operations potentially a week, but what is it really like for them in that downtime?
Back when we were, we are Chosen Company is no longer part of the 59th Motorized Brigade. We were at the period of time I was just talking about, like during the counteroffensive, all the way from, whatever it was, spring 2023, all the way through the rest of 2023, part of 2024, whatever. But we're no longer part of the 59th Motorized Brigade now. So it's a little bit different now. Just the way downtime is, and where we can be and what we can do. At that point, we lived on the front year round. So we never left. There was no rotation or anything. We were on the front for that entire year for 2023. Living in our dugouts and our bunkers and stuff. We were there the entire time. And when it was time to go on an operation, we'd kit up, load up, and be where we need to be in a matter of minutes, and then just hike our way to wherever we need to be. So downtime out there was, we would just find ways to entertain ourselves. We just we could read, listen to music. Some people had like handheld game consoles. They would order. We would make runs into town to get mail and stuff, so you could order stuff and make store runs. And we had but of course it would get boring sometimes, and we'd have to come up with ways to entertain ourselves. There was a period of time where the squads kind of went to war with each other, and we would set up like IEDs and with like training grenades and stuff like that, and like we'd rig them up to trip wires at the top of the stairs to people's bunkers, so when they wake up in the middle of the night and need to go take a piss or something, they'd be half asleep and walk up there and hit a tripwire and detonate a training grenade, or like uh, stick one under somebody's pillow, or like unscrew the bottom step in the staircase and have it set on like a pressure right on the spoon of some training grenades. We had a Dungeons and Dragons campaign that went on for a while. Uh, anything to pass the time, really. A lot of training, though. We spent a lot of time training.
This might actually be a bit of a stupid question, but the media is focused so much on the logistical issues that Russia has encountered, and I'm wondering, is any of that even visible on the ground? Is that something you run into?
There is definitely people have a tendency to kind of take these little scraps of good news and blow them out of proportion. Um, and it makes it seem to communities like NAFO online on Twitter, like pro-Ukraine Westerners and stuff like that. It makes it seem to them as if every Russian soldier is just like some incompetent like convict with no training, and it's no problem, and when in reality it's a grind. There is reality to they are facing a lot of problems, and sometimes those problems do play out on the ground. For example, if they had as infinite a supply of people as they like people to believe, we wouldn't have been able to push as far as we did that first incursion we made into Pervamayask. It had been so long since anybody from the Ukrainian side had made an advance in that area that they had sort of moved forces away from there, and nobody was really there except Storm Z. They just needed those resources elsewhere. So over time, they do run into more and more problems, and then you see stuff like the North Koreans everywhere now, and Putin has gone as long as he could. He's been doing everything he can to not do another mobilization, basically. So they do have these issues, but at the same time, it can be a little more difficult to perceive that sort of stuff on the ground, when they still have so much more than we do. They have constant, seemingly constant artillery. There were periods of time where at certain places in the front, they were firing several hundred shells for every shell. Just have these massive Soviet stockpiles of so much stuff, and kind of just they have stuff like that we don't, and it's reflected in there's a lot of Russian service members dying and a lot of Russian equipment being destroyed, but there's a lot there also.
I don't know if you saw this, and I posted something maybe a month or so ago. It was talking about a recent analysis of the Russian recruitment and what they've been doing to avoid the draft like Gator's talking about. They have raised the monthly salaries for Russian soldiers and the signing bonuses and things like that to astronomical levels. I mean, you're talking some of these things were literally like 10 and 15 times the annual salary of a average Russian. And they're recruiting a lot of the people actually coming from like central Russia and past the Ural Mountains and out there, and in these rural areas where a monthly salary might be as low as just $400 to $600, when they can join and get these bonuses, and suddenly they're making like over 4,000 equivalent of US dollars a month. That's a game changer. And so a lot of people are joining and taking these bonuses and doing that because this is like not just life-changing money that they're getting, it's generational wealth changing money for their family in that small village that they live in and what they're able to do, which is just it's sad in a way because it's kept people joining, which obviously lots of them continue to get killed, but it's kind of indicative of what people will do sometimes for a job when you're really desperate and you need work. You take jobs that are not everyone wants, and they're dangerous, like this war over here. It's the way it is sometimes. And the shell problem is a serious issue too. I posted something a couple of days ago where at the beginning of the war, the U.S. shell production for 155 millimeter rounds was something like 14,000 monthly is what we were producing. Well, they're firing that many
Mhm.
rounds in 1 to 2 days in Ukraine.
Yeah.
And even now, we're coming up on almost 3 years and a lot of money being invested into ramping this up. We're still not quite there yet. But even now, we're still only pumping out around 80,000 shells a month, not a day, but a month. So we're still not meeting the the monthly requirement or need on the Ukrainian side just to even counter 1-for-1 shells, what the Russians are able to do. And the Russians have vast stockpiles, and the reason they do is because they have a very large artillery-based army, and we don't. We have a very Air Force strategic pinpoint type army, and we reduced our artillery. So when we reduced the amount of artillery from the Cold War, we therefore didn't have as much of a demand or need for monthly production numbers and as big a stockpile. We have a smaller cadre of artillery units. And conversely, the Russians have a huge one, so they had a much larger base. And then North Korea has been massively helping to fill gaps. I highly suspect China's filling all the technology gaps in parts that they're missing, everything else, because they're gaining intelligence sharing and stuff like that too. So it's really tough and challenging to deal with that. But before we're talking about
Iran also gives them a lot of
yeah,
stuff.
yeah, a lot of the Shahid drones, that whole thing originally came out of them and stuff there.
Hmm.
Before we run out of time and stuff, John, you had a couple questions you wanted to ask about some of the logistics,
Yeah, can you hear
the
me?
other areas there. Yeah, we can hear you. So
Yeah.
go ahead with
Okay,
your
I didn't
question.
want to jump in. Yeah, I'll stick to my question because that last conversation I wanted to even go further on, but since we're short, logistics wise. So when the foreign fighters go to the Ukraine, is it logistics problems with weapons you're getting, or you're just getting whatever they give you? And then how are you resupplied? And how is the language barrier? Everyone's sending their weapon systems over there. A lot of it just to be tested to see how it actually works. So it's getting to the troops, but how is it? Who's getting what, and how are they resupplying it? All right. Javelins, M240s, anything. There's just the ammunition alone is gonna be a nightmare.
There's never seemed to be much of an issue as far as kitting people out with rifles, machine guns, stuff like that. Uh, Precision rifles. Sometimes, there can be maybe little issues here and there with maybe like thermal optics and stuff can be sometimes units will have to kind of crowd fund to get stuff like that for themselves. Sometimes better kit. A lot of stuff we buy on our own. So that's why it helps so much to have donations and stuff like that, because that's, I mean, the only way sometimes we can pay for certain things like replacements, armor that gets destroyed or equipment that gets destroyed. Um, there isn't always immediate resupply with that sort of stuff, if at all. But
All right.
some things there are, yeah. As far as things like javelins and Western weapon systems and stuff, uh, it basically just depends on how many the armed forces are given, and basically where high command judges they're needed most. So they'll go like stuff like Bradleys and vehicles like that, tanks, things like that. They'll go wherever command feels they will be most useful and are most needed. So some
Fair.
units might see a lot of that stuff, while other units might not see not see as much.
Okay, one follow-up question if I can.
Yeah.
All right, now on your training, who's doing the training? Are the Ukrainians training, or are you training with veterans from other countries or American veterans, and who's pretty much taking up the lead on that?
Both. So chosen company is we've always been a bit unique and done things a little bit our own way. So I'll speak for chosen company, at least in my experience with chosen company. It's a mixture of training from Ukrainians in like our old brigade. There was a lot of stuff that the Ukrainians showed us, how to use certain equipment, tactically how to do certain things that they were used to that we hadn't done before. They would trench warfare is a good example of that. Like when we first got there, they really drilled a lot of that stuff into us, like how to operate in the trenches effectively and stuff, because they had a lot of experience with that kind of thing. But then we also have a lot of time to ourselves that we spend training as well, and we have so many people from so many different militaries that we would kind of honestly sort of all work together to come up with what we felt was the best way to deal with the things we had run into in the past. So, like our CQB system is, for example, is kind of a mixture of European, American, Ukrainian methods that we kind of pick the best elements out of each one that we think work the best and mix them together. And that sort of applies to every kind of doctrine. We kind of take the best elements out of where we have people with experience, the best elements of their experience, and mix them together to form versions of that doctrine that work the best.
That's pretty much how the U.S. Special Forces would do it if they went over and trained you. Same thing. They would just take what you have and work with it.
Mm.
All right. Thank you.
I wanted to make sure I let everyone know I posted your PayPal info set up there. So if they want to donate anything, they know how to do that. So that's in the chat
That would be
guys as well.
beautiful.
Yeah, and when we officially get this video up, we'll make sure to put a lot of that information down in the video descriptions and stuff like that for people so they know where to find that as well. Here's a question for you. Okay, so I've had the unique opportunity of working both at the tactical levels in the Iraq War, but then also working at the strategic level when I spent a number of years working at U.S. European Command on the general staff there. So I was there during Admiral Stavridis' time, and then the first, I think, 6 or so months of General Breedlove when he took command. So this was 2010 through early 2014. As we talked about earlier, it's somewhat convoluted and difficult to figure out how to join the Legion or how to get involved and do some of that. And it's a lot of like friend to friend networking where a lot of that happens. And it's also challenging to raise money and do proper training because there's so many different scam groups out there. It's hard to know where your money is going or if it's actually going to the right people and actually delivering. That's a huge issue. Have people hesitant about some of
That's a big problem.
Some scams that have really burned things. Has there ever been a thought or consideration of establishing a training camp here in the U.S. where you have an area here somewhere in the U.S., maybe Florida, because we have pretty good laws and a big pool to recruit from of military vets, but a place where you have a camp here where there can be a process to take in applications, do some vetting of these people, to do your little bit of screening, and then start establishing some training cycles to go through and do some skill assessments, figure out where they're at, get them trained up and ready for specific things that are needed, equip them so people can, when they're donating money, they're donating it here to the camp. They're, seeing what the kit is, what it costs, filling that donation to outfit, say 10 or 20 guys or whatever. And then as these guys are trained, you got a couple cycles going. As they're trained, you start just everyone starts, flying over there. And then you can fill in holes and replacements from chosen company or some of the other units that need replacements, because you got to have a time where you could take a company and pull them off the line to rest and refit, and you still need other units though that can continue to be on call and fill those gaps. If there's more units to rotate, that becomes possible to do. I know that was kind of a challenge. This whole concept and idea of doing a domestic training camp, to me, seems like the way to go.
I think that's a great idea. I would take vacation time to donate to help that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's a lot of vets around here that would probably offer some services to do that kind of stuff, and it would just be a better way of making it easier for people who want to go and serve and do that, to have a way to connect and actually make that happen. Plus doing the vetting, screening, things like that, training, equipping, it'd be a lot easier to handle.
Man, I wonder what the politics would be, and I'm sure the Russians would love it from a propaganda point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose they probably would. And I mean, I get it, but at the same time, we have Ukrainian units that are being trained in France, in Germany. They're being trained on American facilities in Germany
England
too. Yeah, and in England, going through there. For the life of me, I didn't understand why Watson and Biden and them didn't offer to basically say, all right, Zelensky, you draft 5,000 guys or 10,000 guys, we will run them through a modified U.S. basic training program, infantry training program.
kind of like Blackwater.
Yeah, like Blackwater used to do, exactly their systems, and do that for them, because you can create a modified program that's just tailored for what they need, and then churn out, trained professional guys, and then they can go in theater and get, more of that training experience before they deploy.
I was actually thinking more about the domestic politics, actually.
Yeah, no, you're right. Domestic politics would be quite interesting too, because it's kind of split. There's, you've got part of the Republicans and part of the Democrats that are for it, but then we've also got very vocal elements in
On
both sides that are unified on this one issue. And it's kind of odd to see, because we haven't had that in a long, long time on things like that.
Yeah, it is an interesting split.
This is me talking. I personally think that a lot of that is being fueled and grown from platforms like TikTok, and then how they do some of this stuff on Twitter and on YouTube as well. But I'm telling you, like, TikTok is hands down the most effective propaganda tool by a foreign adversary that's being allowed to openly operate inside of Western countries. And
midnight tomorrow night, Sunday.
so, yeah, thank God. And I hope to God that either sticks or they get forced into separating from the CCP, because they don't have to get rid of the whole TikTok. They just need to separate from being an intelligence apparatus of the Chinese government.
And why won't they let them?
Yeah, we know why
because they're using it.
They want the user data and information, and it's a powerful tool because they're able to shift and change perspectives.
I've never heard of any initiative as far as setting up any training in the US for recruits. I think part of it may be because the AFU is at this point much more interested in people who already have experience. I think that may be part of the reason why there isn't any initiatives like that. There's an International Legion Telegram chat that you can access. Like, if you go to the website, you can apply through email and stuff like that and wait on an answer. And there's a Telegram chat you can join, a recruiting chat, and talk to other people who are waiting on answers, and talk to the chat admin. And some people, I'm in there sometimes, just people who already serve are in there sometimes if they're bored, to ask questions and stuff like that. And we try to help people out who have questions, who might be coming or trying to come. but there's a lot of people I've seen in there apply and get rejected. There's a lot of people I've seen apply and get accepted. It seems that they're much more interested in people who have experience already that would be valuable to them.
Yeah. I think we're like a camp, a training facility or whatever here in the US. It's not so much to take in untrained people more than it is to put it out there and make aware veterans that would be interested in
And
joining.
organized trained people.
Yeah, where they can come, they can first off learn about it. Then they can come over there, be vetted and undergo some specific tailored training that you guys would need for over there because it's going to be different than a lot of us have had in the past. So you guys could kind of dictate a little bit of some of that while they're being vetted being vetted back in Ukraine. And then, they get outfitted and equipped from here by donations from people because it's easier for them to see where their money's going when they can see the camp and the people they're sponsoring, so to speak. And then those recruits are sent over to backfill the units and or even grow new units, but having some place here in the US would make it a lot easier for for people to find you, join, and then deploy over.
I know that there are groups of Americans and Europeans who have formed their own nonprofit organizations that offer training and stuff to people that are in Ukraine and help people with training and equipment and stuff like that. I don't know of any that are like you're describing that have like camps or properties in the United States where you outfit and train and equip people. I don't know of anything like that.
Interesting idea.
It would have to probably be done by a private group, kind of like a Blackwater thing, and do like a CIA contract. Because there's no way to get through it.
I'm quite
Not that I know anything
surprised
about that stuff.
Yeah, I'm literally surprised that honestly we haven't seen like Eric Prince and them being brought in to literally build a contract army and funded to go over and do that. These guys are really freaking good at that kind of stuff. They've got their logistics networks in place, equipment, and they've done this multiple times. So for the amount of money that's being spent over there, you could allocate a couple of, heck, even $1 billion to fund essentially a private army and go to David Smothton, right? The mothball airfield down there and just say, all right, this is the aircraft and equipment we want and need. We'll find pilots, we'll get the equipment going, and they'll build up their force, they'll recruit to their networks, and they'll show up and they'll have like an entire battalion or maybe even a full brigade or even 2 brigades that they could use and deploy to fight. I think that may be a better way going forward is to start leveraging more PMCs like Russia had with Wagner. The Americans can put up some really good freaking PMCs and recruit and know how to do some of that
Wagner's
stuff.
pretty beat up right now, though. Wagner's hammered.
Yeah, they are, which is a great opportunity for us to have some of our own come in and utilize our own experience,
They recruited people out of prison. You actually have real professional soldiers that could go over and
Yeah.
just do what he's doing.
Yeah. I mean, what else would triple canopy? We had what, 2,500, 2,500 guys who were prior Ranger, SEALs and Delta, SEALs and Army Green Berets and other infantry units and stuff like that. They were part of our group there at the man camp. So I mean, it was a big. It wasn't difficult for them to recruit people.
No.
If you have the right incentives and contracts set up like that, you'd find people who'd be willing to join and do that.
That's where Blackwater got their people.
Yeah, yeah.
Operators.
To a lot of people, it's crazy. People wonder like why they join and why they do this stuff. I don't know how to describe it, but there's almost some kind of like adrenaline addiction sometimes to actually being in a fight, being in conflict like that. I mean, I didn't like my first tour, it wasn't the greatest, but I'll tell you what, as I got closer to being done, I started to have this desire where I was like, I don't want to leave. I want to keep doing this. I want to keep working this mission set and keep at it. It's probably why I volunteered, went back a couple more years doing it. as a contractor and such, but there's a lot of people like that.
Because you realize you're good at it. You finally realize that you're good at
You
something.
find purpose. You find purpose in means what
I
happens.
absolutely,
You also get invested, and you want to see
I
you want to see it
absolutely
through.
love
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
job. I love, yeah,
Yeah.
there's nothing I want more than to be back there. I mean, I love my job there. I love my unit. It's, I would, if I had the opportunity to fight alongside this group of people as a career forever, I would do it. I love doing it.
Yeah. I'm a full-time fiction writer at this point, but you know what? I would drop all of this to go back to doing my old job I was doing in Europe in a heartbeat because I really, really liked and enjoyed
Yeah,
that job and mission, and I was really freaking good at it.
yeah.
That's I would leave what I'm doing now to go back to that, but that's not an opportunity anymore. And at this point, I'm 46. I've had 3 hip replacements. I'm a little physically too broke to
I was
be
gonna say,
doing
you
that
gotta be a
kind of
little bit
stuff. I
younger.
wouldn't be safe for everyone at this point. You know, I'm a good
Well,
ops planner at this point, but not doing some of the other stuff I had been involved in. So, but yeah,
Too old to help. I am broke down and be a liability.
yeah, at this point, yeah, yeah. Well, if anyone has any other questions, then if you don't, we'll probably wrap it up here. If you do, it's your last chance to ask them before we close things up.
Keep your head down.
Yeah.
If the war was over today, Gator, what would you do?
So I have an idea that maybe when the war is over, I may try to start a training facility where we recreate the training facilities that we've created with Chosen Company and offer experience from, some of the very few people who have actual experience in actual near peer modern warfare, and offer that training to Americans and, corporate groups and business execs and preppers and anybody really who would want to do it. Do like 2-week courses, weekend courses, 3-week courses, whatever it is, and build, if I can, build a property with CQB, trench, just open ground, and all sorts of different types of combat training and medical training, and ideally find a way to keep Chosen Company together and employ them. I love these guys. They're Chosen Company is my family. Like I care about them more than anything. So if I could find some way, and I am actively trying to set this up with some people I know who may be interested in being investors and looking at properties and stuff like that. If I can find a way to have something positive and productive in place for these people I care about more than anything after the war to make sure they don't sort of fall into the kind of stagnation I was experiencing before going to Ukraine, or the kind that a lot of people I know experienced after Afghanistan and Iraq, and the depression that comes with that. If I can set something up to help people I know avoid that and make money and survive and stay together, that's what I would do.
Follow-up question, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it a possibility that Ukraine will ask Chosen Company to remain to help rebuild their military if it were to end today?
I suppose it's a possibility. I don't really know. That's a good question. I don't. So, like I said before, we're not with the 59th anymore. We're now with the 49th Special Purpose Detachment. So we're at a bit of a higher, more specialized level, and we'll be getting to do some different things and getting experiences that the majority of foreigners and a lot of the military don't get to do. So we will have a lot of unique experiences that may be useful to them in different ways, even in peacetime. So there may be a chance for us to do something in Ukraine. I know there's a lot of guys who have met who are getting married over there and stuff like that. So there's definitely guys who are going to be staying there. Hopefully the military allows them to provide something positive for them to do if that's what they want to continue doing after the war.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Thank
All
you.
right, guys, then we'll probably end it here, but like I say, I've got the link there for you know, his donation stuff. If you guys want to chip in anything towards it, you know, you're free to. If not, that's okay. We want to thank everyone for coming, and you know, I'll see if I can't find a few others that might want to join us and give us a, you know, conversation like this again. So stay tuned for that.
All right, thank you.
Yep. If you want, I can talk to some guys in some other units like 3rd Assault Brigade,
Yeah.
Azov, some other, you know, see if some other guys would want to talk to you guys.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you for watching our video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you'll never miss another video.
In the meantime, we have plenty of reading material to keep you busy. You can find it all on our website, frontlinepublishinginc.com.